The sounds of war had stopped, the blaring alarms, the shattering explosions, and the harsh cries of the dying were gone. Only silence remained, broken by the quiet hum of Ethan's starship as it hovered above the battlefield. The galaxy had been torn apart by conflict, and now it was left to pick up the pieces. Ethan was tired. He had fought in the war for years. He had seen things no one should ever have to witness: worlds destroyed, families wiped out, and friends lost. The human forces had emerged victorious, but the cost was heavy. The victory felt empty. The enemies they had fought were no longer around, but the wounds of the war remained deep in his heart. Ethan was alone. He didn't mind. In the chaos of battle, he had learned to be alone. It was easier than trying to connect with anyone, especially after losing so much. Still, as he walked across the wreckage of the battlefield, a strange feeling tugged at him, a feeling that something or someone was waiting. As he moved through the twisted metal remains of spaceships and the scattered debris of war, he noticed something out of place. Amid the destruction, a faint sound reached his ears. It was soft, almost like a whisper, but there was no one around. He stepped forward, following the sound, and then he saw her. A woman, an alien woman, lying on the ground, her body barely moving. She was covered in dirt and blood, her clothes torn, and her face pale. The beauty of her features was almost otherworldly. Her skin was a soft, pale green, and her eyes, even half closed, shone with a deep sadness. She was not human. He had seen many aliens during the war, but none had ever looked quite like her. She looked delicate, fragile, as if the very weight of the universe was pressing down on her. Ethan's heart raced. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because she was the first living creature he had encountered in days. Maybe it was because her presence felt different. There was something about her that made him feel like he had to help. He knelt down beside her, his fingers brushing her skin. She was cold, but still alive. Her breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. Ethan's mind raced. What should he do? Was an enemy, wasn't she? She looked like one of the alien forces that had fought against humanity. But something inside him told him she wasn't just a soldier. She was something more, someone who didn't deserve to die here. Alone in the wreckage. "Hey," he whispered gently, shaking her shoulder. "Are you okay?" Her eyes fluttered open just a crack. She looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan wasn't sure what to say. He had seen many soldiers in the war, but never like this. This alien woman wasn't the ruthless fighter he had expected. She wasn't a cold, calculating enemy. She looked lost. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice weak. She tried to sit up but winced in pain, her body clearly too broken to move easily. Ethan hesitated for a moment before answering. "Ethan, I'm human." She blinked, surprised, her lips trembling. "Human," she whispered, the word unfamiliar on her tongue. "Are you okay?" "Can help you," Ethan offered, feeling unsure of what to do. He wasn't a medic, just a soldier, but he couldn't leave her here like this. Not when she looked so vulnerable. The alien woman studied him closely, her eyes narrowing as if trying to read him. Finally, she nodded weakly. "Help me, please." Without another word, Ethan scooped her up in his arms. She was light, almost too light. Her body was limp, but she held on to him weakly, her face resting against his chest. The way she clung to him made him realize that she had been alone for too long. That thought bothered him. Why had she been alone? Why hadn't any of her own? People helped her. Ethan carried her to his ship, which was parked nearby. The silence of the battlefield seemed even heavier as they walked, a stark contrast to the chaos that had filled it only days before. As they boarded the ship, Ethan carefully placed her in one of the medical bays. He started the basic first aid process, checking her injuries and using the ship's medical tools to stop the bleeding and stabilize her. The alien woman lay still, her eyes closed in unconsciousness. Ethan watched her for a long time, feeling a strange pull in his chest. She wasn't just an enemy, he realized. She was a person. She was someone who had been caught up in the madness of the war, just like him. Hours later, the alien woman woke up. She looked around in confusion, clearly disoriented. When her eyes landed on Ethan, she stiffened, but he could see the fear in them. "You're safe," he said softly, trying to reassure her. "I won't hurt you." Her eyes remained suspicious, but she didn't move away. "Why? Why did you help me?" Ethan paused. He hadn't really thought about it. Why had he helped her? Maybe it was because after everything he had seen, he didn't want to leave someone else to die alone. Or maybe it was because she wasn't what he expected her to be. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a threat. She was just someone who had survived, just like him. "I couldn't just leave you there," Ethan said, his voice low. "No one deserves that." The alien woman's eyes softened and she looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly. "I don't know if I deserve your help," she murmured. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He didn't know anything about her, about who she was or what she had done. But right now, all he knew was that he couldn't leave her alone to face whatever darkness was in her past. "Maybe you'll find out," he said quietly, as the ship drifted into the empty expanse of space. Ethan couldn't help but feel that his life had changed in ways he couldn't yet understand. The galaxy had been torn apart by war, but perhaps, just perhaps, there was hope for something more. Ethan sat across from Leora in the small, quiet room aboard his ship. The only sound was the hum of the engine as it glided through space. Leora, the beautiful alien woman he had found on the battlefield, was sitting on the bed, her hands folded, in her lap. Her skin, the soft pale green, seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. Her eyes were downcast, filled with a sadness Ethan couldn't yet understand. She had been through so much, and she wasn't ready to talk about it yet. It had been 2 days since he had found her on the battlefield. Since then he had cared for her wounds and tried to make her as comfortable as possible. But she had barely said a word, and Ethan respected her silence. He didn't push her to talk, but the tension in the room was thick. It was clear she was hiding something big. Ethan took a deep breath and broke the silence. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, but I want to understand. Why were you there alone after the battle? You're not like the others." Leora's eyes flickered up at him, her expression unreadable. There was something about the way she looked at him that made Ethan feel as if she were sizing him up, trying to decide how much to trust him. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of the blanket. "I'm not like them," she said softly, her voice a mix of sadness and regret. "No, I never wanted to be part of the war. But sometimes you don't get a choice. They make you do things." Ethan leaned forward, intrigued but careful not to push too hard. "Who made you do what? Who were you fighting for?" Leora's gaze drifted away, and for a moment Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. But after a long pause she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I was part of the Signar. The very ones who fought against your people. I wasn't always with them, though I didn't want to be. But when your people pushed us into war, we had no choice but to fight. It was them or us." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The Signar were one of the most powerful alien races in the galaxy, known for their ruthless tactics. He had heard of them during the war, but he never thought he would meet someone who had been part of their military. "But why did you leave?" Ethan asked, his voice full of questions. "You could have stayed and fought with your people. Why come to us?" Leora's eyes filled with pain. She looked away, unable to meet Ethan's gaze. "I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I had no choice. The Signar were changing. Their leaders were becoming more ruthless, more dangerous. They wanted to use dark powers, forbidden technologies that could destroy entire systems. I couldn't let that happen. Couldn't stay and be a part of that." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Forbidden technologies?" Leora nodded. "Yes. Signar were planning to use an ancient power, one that no race should control. It's a power that could end entire civilizations in an instant. I didn't want that to be the future of my people, so I ran. I betrayed them to stop it." Ethan's mind raced as he tried to process everything she was saying. A part of him wanted to believe her, but another part of him felt uneasy. This was a lot to take in. She was telling him that she had been part of one of the most feared races, in the galaxy, and now she was saying she had turned her back on them to stop them from using a weapon that could destroy everything. Could he trust her? "You're saying you betrayed your own people?" Ethan asked, his voice full of disbelief. "You left them because they were going to use a weapon like that?" Leora's face hardened as she nodded slowly. "Yes, I didn't. Want to fight anymore? Didn't want to be part of the destruction. But I knew that if I didn't act, no one would, so I ran, led to escape it." Ethan stared at her, trying to read her expression. Could see the pain in her eyes. She wasn't lying, not in his gut, not in the way she looked at him. He could see the truth in her face. But why hadn't she told him this sooner? Why had she been so quiet about everything? "So what happens now?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. "Are they going to come after you? The Signar, are they going to come for me too?" Leora looked down at her hands, a deep frown forming on her face. "They'll come for me," she said quietly. "I know they will. And when they do, they won't stop until I'm brought back to answer for what I did. They won't forgive me." Ethan felt a cold chill run down his spine. The Signar didn't forgive. If Leora was telling the truth, if they were as dangerous as she said, then the fight wasn't over, not for her and not for him. They would be hunted. The Signar wouldn't let one of their own just walk away. "But you're not alone now," Ethan said, his voice firm. "You're with me. And I won't let them take you back. Not without a fight." Leora met his gaze for the first time, and for the first time, Ethan saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. It was fleeting, but it was. There, she opened her mouth to speak, but stopped herself. Instead, she nodded, grateful for the offer. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. Leora wasn't just a survivor of the war. She was someone who had fought for what she believed in, and now, together, they would have to face the consequences of her choice. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way out of this together. Days passed as Ethan and Leora traveled through space. The journey was quiet, but the tension between them began to fade. They shared more conversations, though the subject of the war was often avoided. Leora seemed reluctant to discuss her past, but Ethan could tell she was slowly letting her guard down. The walls she had built around herself began to crumble. Piece by piece. Ethan had always been a soldier, trained for combat, for survival. He had never been great at talking to people, especially not people from other races. But with Leora, something felt different. She wasn't just an alien, not just someone he had found in the wreckage of war. She was a person, with dreams, regrets, and a past that shaped her into who she was. Over the days, Ethan began to see her as more than just a survivor of the Signar race. He started to see her as someone he could trust. One evening, as the stars glimmered outside the small ship's window, Ethan found Leora staring out into space, her eyes lost in the vastness of the galaxy. There was something in her gaze, a deep, unspoken sadness. Ethan hesitated for a moment, but then walked over to her. "You okay?" he asked gently, standing beside her. Leora didn't look at him at first, but then she slowly turned, her eyes meeting his. There was a flicker of vulnerability in them that made Ethan's heart tighten. "I think about it a lot," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The war, my people, the things we did." Ethan could feel the weight in her words, the guilt, the pain. He understood it. He had his own demons to fight. But he didn't know how to help her with hers. "You don't have to carry it all alone," Ethan said, his voice firm yet kind. "You don't have to carry the weight of everything that happened. No one's asking you to fix everything." Leora looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I'm not sure how to move past it. How do I stop feeling like I'm the one who caused it all?" He wanted to say the right words, the comforting words that would make her feel better. But the truth was, he didn't have the answers. All he could do was offer her his presence, his support. "You start by not facing it alone," Ethan said quietly. "You have me now. You're not alone." Leora blinked, and for the first time in days, a faint smile appeared on her lips. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Ethan felt a warmth spread through him at the sight. He had never thought he would feel this way for an alien, someone so different from him. But Leora wasn't just any alien. She was someone who had suffered just like him. She was someone who had fought for what she believed in, even if it meant betraying her own people. For the next few days, the bond between them grew stronger. They spent hours talking about their lives, their hopes, and their fears. Ethan told Leora stories about Earth, about the places he had visited, and the people he had known before the war. He spoke of his family, his friends, and the life he had lost. Leora, in turn, shared more about her people, the Signar, and the difficult choices she had been forced to make. As they talked, Ethan began to realize how much he had in common with her. She was just as human as he was, in the way that she felt, in the way that she cared about others. She wasn't just a soldier. A warrior, she was a person who had been caught up in a war not of her choosing. One evening, as the ship glided through the vast emptiness of space, Ethan and Leora sat together at the ship's table, sharing a simple meal. The atmosphere was calm, peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos they had both endured. Leora, usually reserved, seemed more at ease. She smiled at something Ethan had said, and for a moment it felt like things could be okay, you know. Leora said after a long silence, "I never thought I would meet someone like you. Someone who doesn't judge me for my past?" Ethan looked at her, surprised by the honesty in her words. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the other humans I've met, they see me as the enemy. They don't understand. But you don't. Look at me that way. You don't see me as a threat." She paused, her expression softening. "You see me for who I really am." Ethan nodded slowly. "We're all just people. We've all done things we regret. It's how we move forward. That matters." Leora studied him for a moment, and then she reached out, her hand resting gently on his. Ethan's heart skipped a beat, and he felt a warmth spread through him at her touch. The simple contact, the small gesture of trust, meant more to him than words could express. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for believing in me." Ethan didn't know what to say. The words didn't feel enough. But in that moment, he knew that he had made the right choice. He had chosen to help her, to trust her, and now they were both healing together. The galaxy may have been torn apart by war, but maybe they could rebuild something new. Something better. As the ship moved deeper into the unknown, Ethan realized that, for the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Maybe they had both lost everything in the war, but together, they might just be able to find something worth fighting for. The days turned into weeks, and as Ethan and Leora continued their journey through space, they both started to feel like they were escaping the ghosts of their past. The war was far behind them, but the emotional scars lingered. Ethan still thought about his fallen comrades. Leora still carried the weight of the betrayal she had made, but there was a new feeling growing between them. A quiet bond had formed, one built on shared experiences and the understanding that no matter their differences, they were both human in the ways that mattered. Yet, the deeper they went into space, the more Ethan noticed that Leora was becoming distant again. She had moments of silence, moments when her gaze would drift off into the vastness of space. Ethan could feel her pushing him away, even though she didn't want to. The trust between them was there, but something was missing. Something she wasn't saying. One evening, as the stars twinkled outside the ship, Ethan decided he couldn't ignore it any longer. He walked over to Leora, who was standing by the window. Her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice soft but firm. "What's going on, Leora? You don't have to keep hiding from me." Leora stiffened at the sound of his voice, her shoulders tensing. She turned slowly, her eyes avoiding his. "I'm not hiding," she replied, her tone sharp but hollow. I have to think. I have a lot on my mind." Ethan took a step closer, his heart heavy with the thought that something was wrong. He had known for a while that Leora was struggling with her past, but this felt different. There was something she was keeping from him, I can't keep guessing what you're thinking. If you want to talk, I'm here, Ethan said, his voice gentle but full of concern. You don't have to carry this alone, Leora. Leora's gaze flickered up to meet his, and for the first time in days, she saw the real question in his eyes. It wasn't just curiosity or pity, it was care. I don't know if I can tell you, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. You might not look at me the same way after, you know. Ethan took another step forward, closing the distance between them. I don't care about what's in your past. I care about you. But I can't help you if I don't know the truth. Horus. Lips trembled as she took a deep breath. She glanced down at the floor, as if gathering the strength to speak the words that had been weighing her down for so long. I told you I left the Signar because of their plans for destruction, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But that wasn't the only reason. I wasn't just a soldier. I was one of their commanders. I helped plan attacks, strategies. I led armies. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this. He had known that Leora had been involved in the war, but to hear she had been so deeply involved, to the point of commanding forces, hit him hard. I thought you were different, Ethan said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He quickly corrected himself, his voice softening. I mean, I never saw you as a soldier. I saw you as someone who had made a choice to escape that life. But now, Leora's face darkened, and she looked away. I was different. I thought. I was. But when the Signar leadership began to change, when they started talking about using forbidden technologies, I didn't know what to do. The power they wanted to control wasn't just a weapon, it was something worse. It could tear apart entire planets, burn whole civilizations to the ground. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. And you left them because of that? Leora nodded, her expression haunted. Yes, but that's not the worst part. I wasn't just a soldier, I was involved in the research. I helped them develop the weapon. I knew what it could do. When I realized what they were planning, when I saw the destruction they could cause, I couldn't stay, couldn't be a part of that anymore. The weight of her confession hit Ethan like a physical blow. He had known Leora had secrets, but he hadn't expected this. She hadn't just been a victim of the war, she had been a part of it, key figure in the destruction. I didn't want to do it, Leora continued, her voice breaking, but I was too far in. I helped them. I couldn't just walk away without consequences, so I betrayed them. I ran, fled before they could use the weapon. I never thought I'd survive. Ethan stood in stunned silence, trying to process everything she had just told him. He had always seen her as someone who had made a difficult decision to leave her people. But now, hearing that she had been part of the very thing she had wanted to destroy, he wasn't sure what to think. You think I'm a monster? Leora said, her voice trembling with fear. You should. I helped create a weapon that could destroy everything. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I don't. No. I don't know if I can live with what I've done. Ethan shook his head, stepping closer to her. He reached out and gently took her hands in his, surprising both of them. No, he said, his voice steady. I don't think you're a monster. I think you made a choice, and that choice wasn't easy. But you're not the same person who helped them. You're someone else now. You're trying to make things right, even if it's hard. Leora's eyes welled up with tears, and she nodded, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry. Ethan squeezed her hands gently. You don't have to apologize. I'm here for you. The two of them stood in silence for a long time, the weight of the truth hanging in the air between them. But in that silence, Ethan knew one thing for sure. Leora's past didn't define her. She had made mistakes, but she was trying to make things right, and that was enough for him. As the ship continued its journey through the stars, Ethan and Leora knew the road ahead would be difficult. But together, they would face whatever came their way. The ship was quiet again, but this time, it was different. The silence between Ethan and Leora wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't peaceful either. After Leora's confession, things between them had changed. Ethan had promised to help her, face the consequences of her past, but he knew the road ahead would be difficult. And deep down, he feared that their bond might not be strong enough. To survive the storm that was coming, The Cygnar would not let her go so easily. Ethan knew that. Leora's escape hadn't gone unnoticed. She had betrayed one of the most powerful races in the galaxy, and there was no way they would let her run free forever. As much as she tried to escape her past was never going. To leave her, Ethan sat in the ship's cockpit, staring out into the endless stretch of space. The stars seemed distant, unreachable, much like his hopes for the future. The thought of the Cygnar coming after them was overwhelming. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was protecting someone who had done things she regretted, but was trying to make things right. Leora entered the cockpit, her footsteps soft. She stood behind him for a moment, looking at the same stars. Ethan didn't turn around at first. He could feel her presence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "We're not safe, are we?" Leora's voice was low, her words almost a whisper. She didn't need to ask. She already knew the answer. Ethan sighed, finally turning to face her. "No, the Cygnar won't let you go. They'll come for you. When they do, it won't just be you they're after. It'll be anyone who stands in their way." Leora's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. "I've been running from them for so long. I thought I could escape, but I was wrong. They'll never stop hunting me." Ethan stood up and walked toward her, his eyes meeting hers. "Can't just keep running, Leora. We have to face them. We have to find a way to stop them. You're not the only one who has something to lose here." She shook her head, looking away. "You don't understand. You don't know what they're capable of. The Cygnar will destroy everything to get me back. If they think we're a threat, they won't hesitate to wipe us out." Ethan took a step closer, his voice steady but firm. "Then we'll fight. Back. We've fought in wars before. We can do it again." Leora met his gaze, searching his face for any hint of doubt. But all she saw was determination. Ethan wasn't going to back down, and that realization hit her harder than any of the battles she had fought in the past. He was willing to face the Cygnar for her. He was willing to put everything on the line. "I don't deserve your help," Leora whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I betrayed my people, Ethan. I turned my back on them, and now I've dragged you into this mess. I don't know if I can keep asking for your help." Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand. "You don't have to ask. I'm with you, Leora, and I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, the two of them stood there, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. The reality of what they were about to face hit them both. The Cygnar were coming, and when they arrived, it wouldn't just be a battle of armies. It would be a battle for survival. Leora took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I don't know if I can face them. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Ethan squeezed her hand, his voice steady. "You are. We'll face them together. Whatever happens, we'll do it together." Leora nodded. But deep down, she still wasn't sure. She had never been a warrior in the way Ethan was, a soldier who had seen the worst of the galaxy, but still kept fighting. She had always been a commander, a leader, someone who made the tough decisions. But now, she wasn't sure if she was the person she used to be. She wasn't sure if she had the strength to fight back anymore. But Ethan believed in her. And for the first time in a long while, she began to believe in herself. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared, breaking the silence. Ethan's heart raced as he jumped to the controls. Leora's eyes widened with fear. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure she was ready. "They've found us," Ethan muttered, his hands moving quickly over the controls. "The Cygnar are closing in," Leora's mind raced. Known this moment would come, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to do. The fear she had carried with her for so long threatened to overwhelm her. Ethan looked at her, his expression hardening. "We're not going to run anymore. We're going to fight. We've come too far to back down now." Leora nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The ship shook as the enemy approached, their weapons aimed directly at them. The Cygnar weren't just sending a small fleet, they were sending everything they had. "We need a plan," Leora said quickly, her mind racing. "If we can disable their main ship, we might be able to escape." Ethan didn't hesitate, "And that's what we're going to do. We'll hit them hard and fast. No second chances." Leora looked at him, seeing the determination in his eyes. She felt a spark of hope, a glimmer of strength she hadn't felt in years. Might not have been the warrior she once was, but with Ethan by her side, she knew they had a chance. The Cygnar were coming for them. But they weren't just going to let themselves be captured, they were going to fight back. The ship rocked violently as Ethan punched the controls, sending the vessel into a series of sharp, evasive maneuvers. The Cygnar were close now. Ethan could see their ships in the distance, dark and menacing, their weapons primed and ready for the attack. The fleet had arrived faster than he had expected, and there was no time to waste. This was at the moment they had both been dreading, the moment when the past finally caught up with them. Leora stood beside Ethan, her hands gripping the seat, tightly as the ship jolted under another blast. Her mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. This was what she had been running from for so long. She had tried to escape her past, but now it was here, and there was no running anymore. "You ready?" Ethan asked, his voice calm, though she could hear the tension in it. He looked over at her, his expression hard, but there was something else in his eyes, a quiet trust. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, he was fighting for her. And for the first time, Leora wasn't sure if she was ready to fight for herself. She nodded, though the words caught in her throat. "I've never been ready for this." "You don't have to be," Ethan said, his eyes focusing on the control panel. "You just have to do what you can. We'll do this together." No. The ships were closing in fast. Ethan's hands worked quickly, adjusting the ship's speed and angle. He wasn't sure how long they could hold out against a full Cygnar fleet. But he knew one thing: he wasn't going down without a fight. And he wouldn't let Leora face this alone. Leora moved to the back of the ship, her mind spinning with thoughts of what was about to happen. She had been a commander before, leading troops into battle, but this was different. This wasn't just a mission. This was personal. The Cygnar weren't just coming after her because she was a traitor. They were coming because of everything she had left behind, wanted her back, and they would stop at nothing to get her. Her fingers brushed over the weapons console. She hesitated for a moment before pulling the controls towards her. This was the moment she would stop running. She had already betrayed her people once, but she wasn't going to let them destroy everything she had left. She wasn't going to let them take Ethan. She wasn't going to let them take her future. Ethan glanced back at her, seeing what she was doing. "You sure about this?" Leora met his gaze, her face set in determination. "I'm sure." The ship shook as another blast hit them. The Cygnar were almost in range, and Leora knew they didn't have much time left. She punched the button, activating the weapon systems. For a brief moment, the ship's shields flickered, taking the brunt of the attack, but it wasn't enough. The enemy's firepower was overwhelming. The Cygnar were relentless, and they had no mercy for traitors. But neither did Ethan. He adjusted the ship's course again, this time heading straight for the largest Cygnar ship. It was the command vessel, the one that would be leading the charge. If they could disable that ship, they might stand a chance of surviving. "You ready?" Ethan asked again, his voice tense but filled with purpose. Leora took a deep breath, her hands steady on the controls. "Let's do this." With a final glance at Ethan, she fired. The weapon systems hummed to life, launching a powerful energy blast toward the Cygnar flagship. The shot hit its target, sending a ripple through the enemy's shield. The ship rocked violently, but it didn't take long before the Cygnar returned fire. Their weapons focused on the small human vessel. Ethan's hands flew over the controls, dodging incoming fire as best as he could hear the ship's hull groaning under the pressure, but he didn't flinch. His eyes were locked on the Cygnar flagship, and he wasn't about to let it get away. Leora fired again, this time hitting one of the engines on the enemy ship. The blast sent sparks flying, and for a moment, the Cygnar flagship faltered. "Slowing down? We've got them on the ropes," Ethan said, a hint of hope in his voice. "One more hit, and we can make it out of here." But just as the words left his mouth, the ship jolted again. This time, it wasn't a blast from the Cygnar. It was something worse. The ship's sensors flashed red as they detected an incoming missile, one that had locked onto their location. The Cygnar had called in reinforcements. "Ethan," Leora shouted, her voice filled with panic. "We can't outrun this." Thinking, Ethan slammed the ship into a sharp dive, avoiding the missile by mere inches. The ship skidded through space, the controls trembling under the strain. Leora's heart raced in her chest as she watched the missile fly past, its trail a bright streak against the dark sky. "We're not out of this yet," Ethan said, his voice low and focused. "We need to disable their weapons before they fire." Again, Leora's mind raced, and then she saw a weak spot in the Cygnar flagship's defense. A small opening in its shield, barely visible. She didn't think. She just acted. "Ethan, hold on," she yelled, her hands steady on the controls as she fired another shot. This time, the blast hit the weak spot with pinpoint accuracy. Cygnar flagship's shields flickered and then completely failed, exposing the ship's core. Ethan grinned, his eyes bright with determination. "We've got them now." With a final focused shot, they hit the core of the Cygnar flagship. The explosion lit up the darkness of space, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The other Cygnar ships faltered, their formation breaking apart in confusion. For a moment, everything was silent. Leora looked at Ethan, her face pale but filled with relief. "We did it." Ethan nodded, his grip loosening on the controls as he let out a long breath. "Yeah, we did." The battle wasn't over, but the first major obstacle had been destroyed. They had fought back, and for the first time in a long while, Leora felt like she could breathe again. "We're not done yet," Ethan said quietly, turning the ship away from the wreckage. "But we've got a chance." And with that, they flew into the unknown, ready for whatever came next.